Hey guys, several of you have asked me to describe in detail or think out loud about what I do when I attack a lock for the first time. I call it first encounter. When I find a lock that I've never opened before, as is the case with this one, what do I do step by step in kind of a slow motion so you get an idea of what it is that my thought process is when I try to open a lock. Now this is a lock that was given to me by a co-worker a couple of days ago. This one is in pretty rough shape. He took it off a warehouse where somebody tried to beat their way through the lock. They did not get in, but he gave me the lock. He did not give me a key. I've never picked it. I have no idea what the bitting is like, but I'm not even sure after taking this beating this thing's going to work. So since we don't know, the first thing I like to do is to kind of hedge my bet just a little bit. I like to apply some lubrication just to make sure everything's going to be working. And I know there's a lot of different lubricants out there, but I like using this because it really pisses you guys off. When I use WD-40, especially when I squirt it in there like this, I usually get about 50 emails from you guys saying that that's not the best lube. And you know what? I know, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right, before we get started, let's go ahead and just take a quick rake and just kind of rake that lube in, make sure it's worked in those pins. And we're going to let it sit for a few minutes and soak in so we got a better chance. And then I'll clamp it up and we'll get started with the next step. Alright, you can see this thing really is beat to hell. It's really an ugly lock. But let's just continue. I have no idea if we're going to get this thing open or not, but let's just go through the process. That's really what this is about. Alright, the first thing I want to do, particularly since I know this thing has been, looked like pretty viciously attacked, I want to make sure that the core still rotates free. So just put a tension wrench in there. You can even use the tip of your pick. And it looks like this core still, I think you can see that in the camera, it still rotates. It's a little bit rough, drags a little bit from probably where somebody smashed the side of it, but it does rotate. So that's not going to be a concern. The next thing I want to do is I want to take my pick and I want to make sure that somebody didn't do something stupid, like break off a screwdriver or something inside of there. So I'm going to shove it in there and just check and make sure I can get the pick to the back of the lock. You never know what you're going to find. People break off sticks inside of here. They shove glue inside of them, crazy glue. I've even saw one where a guy, that's foam, that insulating foam, he shot it up in there and that had to be dug out a little bit at a time. Okay, the next thing you want to do is run your pick over your pins and make sure that they're all springy. Be ashamed to start picking pins and find out one of them is frozen or locked in place for some reason. And then the last thing I want to do, just so I know what I'm working with, I want to count my pins. And I believe, feels like we got 6 pins here, so that's what we're dealing with. All right, once I know it all works, once I know the keyway is clear, we got plenty of room to work, let's go ahead and move to that next step. Okay, now that we know that we have a clear keyway, the first thing I like to try is rocking it. Now there's a tool made just for rocking. This is called the L rake or city rake. This is designed to simulate the bitting. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But you'll know pretty quick usually. So we just make sure it's still locked. Take our city rake or L rake, put it in there, and we're just going to rock it up and down. We're not going to shove it in and out like we're raking. Even though it's called a rake, we're really trying to simulate the bitting, as you saw there. So it does work. We lock that back up again. Just by rocking up and down, we've managed to simulate the bitting, and in that case we just got lucky. I really didn't expect that. And it's not going to happen for us again. Okay, so let's assume that the city rake doesn't work. And usually I'll give it 2 or 3 strokes in and out, and then if that doesn't work, then I'll move directly to my standard pick. And this is a Peterson gem. You can see it's got a slight curve there. I put it in upside down, and what we're going to do here, I'm going to continue to to rock it, except now, because this has this curve on it, I might move it up and down the stack a little bit, trying to find out if there's maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 pins that are maybe a little bit higher than the others. Sometimes this works, the city rake doesn't, and this does work. So again, put it in there. Okay, this doesn't usually happen that way, fellas. But when it does, I have to say, when you rock it, when it does work, it usually works pretty fast. And of course, it won't work on the second try. Alright, so enough of that. You see the whole process of rocking. But let's assume that didn't work. And let me find the picks. We'll discuss the next technique I move to. Alright, assume rocking doesn't work. The next thing I move to is raking. I got several weapons to choose from when I rake it, and a lot of this depends on my mood, and it depends on the size of the keyway itself sometimes. So starting probably with the most common, the one you guys are most familiar with, is a Bogota. This is a copy by Sparrows, and it's called they call it the triple rake, I believe. This works pretty good, just to copy the Bogota. This is the same thing, Bogota, except this is a double. This one's almost identical. This one Sparrows calls the worm. You'll notice that the profile, the height from the bottom of the pick to the top of the pick is pretty narrow compared to the standard triple. So in some keyways that are shorter, you can't get this one in without oversetting all the pins, but you can get the worm in, and so I find that quite useful. Another one I find useful is called the snake rake, and this one also is by Sparrows. This one's kind of smoothed out. Helps it slide in and out a lot easier, but it's just a rake, that's all it is. And a tool that I've seen used a lot for raking is just a standard diamond. So let's go ahead and see if we can't rake this thing open real quick with one of these tools. Alright, we get ready to rake this thing. We want as much room inside of that keyway as we can get. And so this is time to pay a little bit of attention to your tension tool. Now on mine, I have it bent so that there's a long end and there's a short end. If you put the long end in there, it's going to eat up the entire length of your keyway, and you're going to rob yourself of a lot of the angles up and down that you need in order to pick those pins. So what I do, even though it gets knocked out a little bit easier sometimes, I use the short end. I'm just trying to keep tension on the core. I don't need to go deep inside of the keyway. And on this one, I'm going to use the worm, because that seems to work for me pretty good. That's usually the first one I start with. I'm going to apply light tension, and I'm going to turn it sideways because I like to get just a little bit violent with the lock sometimes. Now, when we put the key, sometimes I think that way, when we put the pick in there, we don't just stick it in and go in and out the same angle. You're going to see me angling it up, you're going to see me angling it down, changing the angles, trying to set those pins. I'm going to be applying upward pressure in different degrees, and I'm going to start off with light tension on the key pins, and then I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to start putting more and more tension as hopefully we set the lower pins, and then we need to start getting at those higher pins. So let's see if we can't make this work. Usually this is very quick. Get that pick in, or that tension wrench. So just stick it in there and just try different angles. We're playing a game of statistics here. There we go again. That was not expected. We're playing a game of the odds. We're trying to get as many possible combinations as we can in a short period of time. And that's usually the result. Usually you don't get it, and let's assume we didn't get that lock open by raking. Let's figure out what the next technique's going to be. Alright, up until this point, let's assume nothing has worked. So the next technique I'll use, I call it zipping. It's a kinetic attack against the pins. And you can use, again, you have a choice of different tools. I like to use the standard Peterson gem. That works pretty good. This also is a Peterson. I think this is called a Hook 2. And you can see this is rounded on the edge. And that's really, when we start using kinetic weapons, we don't want the pick to get caught up in the keyway or snag on any of the pins. So when it's rounded like this, that'll help it not get stuck, helps it slide right by. We also have this one. This one is, for some reason they call this the triple rake. It is not a rake. If you look at the very sharp angles on the top of this, it's a kinetic weapon. You need to strike those pins quite violently, and you really have two chances at it. First chance, second chance. So chances are we can knock them into place using this triple rake. And then the last one, again, the multi-purpose tool, the diamond. Again, if you look at that angle, it's a good angle. It's not likely to get caught on those pins when we yank it out of there. And it's just slide right by, and that hump there will give quite a significant bump to that pin, perhaps knocking it into its set position. So why don't we pick one of these tools and see if it works. Okay, this double or triple rake, whatever you want to call it, I've even heard it called a batang. I don't know if that's the right name or not, but this is the weapon that's designed for this type of attack, for the zipping attack. It's designed as a kinetic weapon. And what I mean by kinetic weapon, let's put the tension wrench in there. We're going to put this all the way in, and this is called zipping. We're going to put light tension, and we're going to take this pick, we're going to push up against the pins, and we're going to yank it out. It'll go zip, and it'll sound like you're zipping up a jacket. The idea is that we can bounce some of those pins into the set position. Now, in between zips, don't release your tension. Let me get that in there, you devil. Keep the tension on, and chances are after 2 or 3 tries, it'll knock them into place. If it doesn't, that means you've probably overzipped or overset something. Try it again. All the way to the rear, a little bit of tension, and let's zip this baby open. Now you can try different degrees of upward pressure with your pick. Start off low and then push, as you do the second or third zip, push upwards a little harder. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If you have no security pins, this is usually a pretty successful pick. Let's try one more try with the standard gem. This is probably my most common tool, and it's multi-purpose. It's kind of rounded on the end. So if we can zip in here, and the answer is going to be no. Okay, so zipping doesn't work. What do we do next? Well, let's find out. Alright, this next technique is called bitch picking. This means I'm getting to my level of desperation. I'm trying to avoid single pin picking. So I'm trying everything to get around doing that. And I'm going to use, again, standard Peterson gem. But you notice these gems, they come in different thicknesses. There's this blue handle one which is 15 thousandths. If you try to do bitch picking with this one, you're going to destroy your pick very, very quickly. So you need, in order to do bitch picking, you need a keyway that's wide enough to fit this very sturdy pick. Okay, how does bitch picking work? Well, I'm going to use the long end of my tension wrench. I'm going to put it down there because I want full support. I don't want this thing bouncing out because, again, I'm going to be quite violent. I'm going to apply moderate tension, put my pick in there, moderate tension, and then I'm just going to randomly bounce around, hoping that I'm hitting the right pin. By keeping the right level of tension on the tension wrench, sometimes it'll reach the shear line, and then of course the pin will be frozen in place, and sometimes you can get lucky. If you get over enthusiastic, like I feel like I probably have here, what you'll find is that you overset something. It went past the shear line. So let's try that again with just a little bit less vigorous attack. And it doesn't always work, but when it does, it's usually pretty quick. And there we go. Alright, bitch picking does work, but again, not on this lock. It didn't work. Now we got to go to the last resort. Alright, before we get into the actual single pin picking, I'd like to talk a little bit about the picks. Now, these are all Peterson, but they're pretty much the same shape for any manufacturer, so it really doesn't matter who makes it. This is called a standard hook, and this is probably the most common pick that I use because it opens up the biggest majority of the locks. You'll notice the profile. In other words, the distance from the tip of the pick to the bottom of the pick is very narrow, so you can fit it into a lot of very tight keyways. The problem with this pick is that it doesn't allow you to set very high pins. Now, if you need to set high pins and the keyway is a little bit more open, you can use something like this. This is Peterson calls this the gem, but it's about like a medium hook. It's a little bit wider from tip to the bottom, which allows you to set higher pins, and you can see this entire shaft is a little bit thicker, which gives you a little bit better feedback and better feel. Not even this is enough sometimes to set some of those very high pins, and you need to try another pick. This is a true medium hook. You'll notice again the distance from here to here is quite a bit greater than either of these two, which means it won't fit into many keyways. But if you have a very high set pin, you got to figure out a way to get that one inside of the keyway. If you don't like this one, this is called a DeForest hook or a diamond hook, and I like this one a lot because it gives you about the same amount of lift as this medium hook and perhaps even a little bit more, and you can angle it. If you put it in just a little bit angled, you don't take up too much of the keyway. So sometimes when this one will not fit in the keyway, this DeForest diamond does fit in the keyway. So those are your choices. That's what you do use a different size hooks for. Alright, our last attack on this lock that we have never opened before is going to be single pin picking. Now, it takes the most amount of time, which is why you try to avoid it. There's a couple of ways you can tension this, bottom of the keyway, but if you try to use bottom of the keyway and you're going to use a kind of a deep hook like this Peterson gem, that you're going to be robbing yourself of the bottom working portion of the keyway in this case. So I'm going to try to use top of the keyway, and that gives me the entire depth of this keyway to work with. Now, I'm not going to bore you. You guys have seen single pin picking before. No point in going through it here. This video is probably already long enough. But let's say that you get through, you've tried all the different techniques. You've already rocked it, didn't work. You raked it, didn't work. You tried zipping it, didn't work. You bitch picked it, didn't work, and you struggled and you still weren't able to get an SPP. What do you do with a lock? Well, fellas, you can't open all of them. Let me get this out of the vise here. So what do I do with these when I can't open them? It just means that right now my skill level's not high enough to open the lock. So I don't throw it away, and I don't give it away usually. I'll set it aside, I put it in my naughty bucket, and then about every week I'll take it out, play with it for 30 minutes or so, and that helps me improve my skills. And sooner or later, believe me, I'll get into the lock. And so will you. Anyway, thanks for your time, fellas. Everybody stay safe, stay legal.